Kia ora koutou. Michael Lunig writes, there are only two feelings, love and fear, only two languages, love and fear. There are only two motives, two procedures, two frameworks, two results, love and fear, love and fear. There are books written about the languages of love, but I've yet to see a book about the languages of fear. Maybe it's because we don't want to name the thing that's inside us and lurking around us, the thing that we don't like, the thing that keeps us worried when we don't want to be. As Wendell Berry writes, I wake up at night in fear of what my life and my children's lives might be. Fear does that. It stalks into our waking and sleeping dreams. Sometimes the fears are rational and sensible, and sometimes they're not. We all have them. And some of us, some of the time, can be overwhelmed by them. Those with less resilience and less support, like many of our young, can fall prey to this stalker. There are fears about health and safety, about money and security, about children and loved ones, about our community and society, about the future, including the future of life on earth. The fears are so many and some so big, we often feel at a loss, helpless. We can spend a lot of our time trying to protect ourselves and our loved ones from such fears. Though we know in some things, many things even, our ability to prevent what happens is limited. Like a storm, calamity just comes. So we practice and teach self-care. Like Wendell, we go to the woods and lakes and the herons, to the peace of wild things, and bathe our souls in its beauty and its hope. We practice and build resilience in our loved ones and those in our care and sphere, helping them to endure calamities, to gain the skills to survive and rebuild. We lean into the power of friendship, the joys of music, art and food, the serenity and solace of nature's creatures, and the warm embrace of little pleasures. We try to gain perspective, the balance needed to live life fully, caring and contributing. Today in the world around us, fear is also a factory. It makes myths about fears. It tells people that unless they buy this, believe that, vote for the mightiest and virile, build bigger walls and stronger borders, take up arms and go to war, our fears will materialize and ultimately destroy all that we hold dear. This factory uses modern technologies and media to propagate fear and sow distrust. Putin's empire, for example, has an overseas disinformation department whose task is to create false narratives in the Western media, partly to fuel fear, partly to fuel the idea we can do nothing. How it works is that unaligned voters are persuaded not so much as to believe these false narratives, but to doubt all narratives, all politicians, and not turn out to vote. And it's not just the likes of Putin that are doing this. This fear factory is very influential. Like empires from time immemorial, fear understands power as having armies, influence, weaponry, and subjugating enemies. both enemies outside one's borders and enemies within. An enemy quickly becomes anyone who looks, talks, loves, behaves, or believes differently from the empire's norms. We need to remember this context of fear and its understanding of power was what Jesus was born into, and in which his movement that we are a part of was conceived. If you doubt the influence of the fear factory, imagine for a moment a politician or party leader in Tel Aviv or Khartoum or Washington or Moscow or even Wellington, telling the populace to love one another and love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Such politicians would be laughed at. Instead, driven by fear, the populace too often supports a Netanyahu, who instead of seeking justice for the 1,200 Israelis murdered, goes on a killing spree, preaching the false narrative that with the death of your enemies will come security. And the profiteers of war, the profiteers of fear, look on and applaud. Some people have a God who controls the whole world, allowing calamities and repairing the faithful afterwards. A God of favourites, a Noah's Ark type of God. But this God is not the God of love. This God of the Ark has no problem killing children, animals, and other innocents. This God in the end of the Ark story, and we need to look beyond the rainbow, leaves the faithful hero Noah drunk and cursing his offspring. For Noah's God is the God of fear. We need to understand the genre of Noah's Ark. It is not an exemplary tale, but a salutary one, about the misuse of power by the character called God, and our misunderstanding of what true power is. True power is the love called compassion and justice that we see in Abraham in chapter 18 of Genesis, just a few chapters after Noah. But note that this God of fear never goes away in Scripture, round endorsing favourites, murdering enemies, spreading mistrust in other humans, foreigners, promoting punishment and trading in guilt. And this fear God is still there in the New Testament when Jesus is living the God of love, and is still there here in the church today. So to paraphrase Lunig, there are two feelings, two languages, two results, and two gods, love and fear, two understandings of faith, two types of religion, two spiritualities, love and fear, love and fear. There's a little story Anthony de Mello tells of a holy woman captured by bandits. The woman says to the bandit leader, "Show me how powerful you are. Cut off the branch of that tree." He draws his sword, and with one swipe, the branch is gone. And she says, "Show me how powerful you are. Put it back." The bandit laughs. "You must be crazy to think anyone can do that." The holy woman responds, "On the contrary, it is you who are crazy, to think you are powerful because you can kill and destroy. That is easy. The truly powerful, though, know how to heal and create." That's the problem with killing and wars. It takes but an instant to end someone's life. But to heal the life of that person's family and community after killing and war takes a long, long time. And much wisdom and skill to turn bitterness to forgiveness, to turn hate to peace. The American comedian Bill Hicks writes, "There's just a simple choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your doors. Buy guns," he's American, "close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see us, all of us, as one." In the 1960s and 70s, some theologians used the metaphor of clowning to explain Jesus' relationship with the Roman Empire. Although these theologians created much consternation and were derided for suggesting that sober, serious Christianity's founder was clowning, the theologians did have a point. Comedians at their best poke fun at the powerful, dethroning the myths of power, and implicitly suggesting that under their protective robes of office or armor, we are all just the same. One race called humanity, one whānau. Bill Hicks went on, "Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it on feeding and clothing and educating the poor of the world, which would pay for many times over, not one human being excluded, and we could, forever, live in peace." Imagine Bill Hicks as a jester at the Republican National Convention happening this week. Jokes like that might endanger his life. For there in Milwaukee, us versus them, we are God's favorites. Adversarial thinking reigns. The speeches reek of power that is fueled by fear. Note the linkage Hicks is making between, firstly, the language of love. Secondly, the understanding that humanity is one. Thirdly, the reallocation of money away from feeding the factory of fear and killing to feeding, clothing, and educating those in poverty. Fourthly and lastly, peace. Some of the most inspirational people, like Mother Teresa, have lived and preached that linkage. She wrote, "If we have no peace, it is because we've forgotten that we belong to each other." The language of love begins with belonging. That is the fundamental security we try to offer each child and person in a family, and each citizen and migrant in a country, and each human being who walks the earth. We belong. Despite all our difference, what is fundamental is common humanity. And many religions, including Christianity, use language and rituals like baptism and communion to underline that oneness and connectivity. Yet unfortunately, as we know, too often, religion's preachers get seduced by the god of fear and use their language and rituals to create new walls of division between insiders and outsiders, right believers and wrong. So too with nations, worried that outsiders will come inside and muddy the floor, worried that their wealth won't be enough for their own imagined needs, create borders of division wired with the language and posturing of fear. Reallocation, chiefly done in most countries by taxation, can be seen on the one hand as doing the bare minimum for those in poverty, to minimize starvation, thwart rebellion. Or on the other hand, as a means of expressing a vision of oneness and justice, to support each and every person to not just survive but to thrive, participating and contributing. The former is a recipe for continued misery, the latter a recipe for peace. For peace is not just the absence of war. It is about building a society where individuals, regardless of circumstances, culture, gender, or class, are valued, supported, and empowered. Peace, says Martin Luther King, is not a distant goal that we seek, but a means, the actual building of a society that values, supports, and empowers all. We call it justice. But a means, says King, by which we arrive at that goal called peace. In closing, I think of the quote by the Roman historian Sallust, who died in 34 BC. Harmony, peace, he writes, makes small things grow. Lack of it makes great things decay. The language of fear, distrust, favourites, mighty right, killing. This language will with time corrode civilizations, and the fabric of all healthy relationships will decay. Whereas the language of love, belonging, oneness, justice, and peace is like fertile soil that enables plants and weeds to flourish and the whole garden to thrive.